This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy, How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com. Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, the future of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. How we intend to honor and carry on David's legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, please help us preserve David Horowitz's legacy by going to FrontPageMag.com. You're going to see a top right-hand corner box of that site, and it's titled Remembering David Horowitz. Please click on it, and you can read all about David, and if you want to help and can help, you can take it from there. What an honor and privilege to have with us this evening Daniel Greenfield, the CEO of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, the editor of the blog The Point, and a great member of the Glazov Gang. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. It always feels like coming home.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, it's a little bit hard to find the words to have this discussion and even to begin this discussion. It's a sad time for all of us. I'll just say very briefly to begin this discussion, and of course I'm referring to the passing of David. I've known David for 25 years. I've worked for David for roughly that amount. I reached out to him when I was a young man many years ago. I read Radical Son. At that time, I'd written a little script, 15 tips on how to be a good leftist. I wrote him a letter. I sent him the script, and things kind of went from there, and that's another story. But David gave me my life in many respects in terms of professionalism. I was able to live out my calling. I was able to live out my mission, and it's been such an honor to fight at his right-hand side. He was the general, and I was one of the soldiers, as you have been, Daniel. So this is quite a time. It's a sad time to lose David. And I'll also say, to begin this conversation, that there is a very evil idea that I dedicated my life to from when I was a kid, to fight. I dedicated my life to fight a very evil idea, and that's the Marxist idea, the idea that gives impetus and life to the left. And for obvious reasons, in terms of my own background, that's my life mission, is to fight that idea. And I don't think we know many people who have fought that idea as courageously and as valiantly, as wisely, as successfully as David has done throughout his life. He was on the front lines and fought this monstrous idea that has caused so much mass suffering. And it's a great inspiration and also a relief for me to have a great person such as yourself, Daniel, to now take on his role. You are his intellectual heir that he wanted you to be. And I'm not only giving you these compliments because I am afraid of getting fired by you, but you have understood this idea as well, that we need to fight. And all of your work over the years has been brilliant. You very wisely gauge the evil of this idea that we're fighting and its earthly incarnations. And it's an honor and once again a great inspiration to have you as the general now. And let's see what we can do to carry on this battle and to fulfill David's legacy. And thank you, Daniel. And let me hand over my introduction to you now.
Well, you've talked beautifully about how David shaped you. David shaped me. I think David shaped all of us. We're a team. And David is actually the one who made us a team, because he gave us a really this compelling understanding of the world, this conflict, this primal conflict that we're in, and you've written beautifully about it. And your books that actually touch on the connection between the left and the jihad, which we're, by the way, seeing play out just right now in DC, but that may be a conversation for later. But really, David helped us frame the world in a compelling, meaningful way. And he also did this with a focus on telling the truth in the most direct way possible. And the entire conservative movement, not just us, owe him an incredible debt. I can't imagine, the Trump administration, the MAGA movement in its current form, if David had never actually existed, if he'd never come over to the right, if he'd never actually taught us how to understand the left, how to understand our enemies, because so many Republicans were marred in this complacency, this idea that the other side just had these minor differences, that it's just really no particularly big deal. And when something like the DC shooting, which just now happened, and you have all these leftist groups coming out to cheer the shooter, just as it did with Luigi, Republicans would be kind of uncomfortable with it, but they wouldn't know what to do about it, what to say about it. And today we live in a world where they are very eager to speak about it and to expose it. And that is, again, very much David's legacy. And that's what the fight that we've been fighting, you and your work as editor of Front Page Magazine, and your very important books, which, people absolutely should read. It's there up there on frontpagemag.com also. And, the rest of our great team that fights this fight together with us.
Well, thank you, Daniel. And actually, let me just touch on what you've said about the Trump administration and David. You also mentioned this in your recent article. So I want everybody to go read Daniel's recent piece at frontpagemag.com, The Future of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, How We Intend to Honor and Carry On David's Legacy by Daniel Greenfield. Daniel, you mentioned in that article that a lot of people that are in the Trump administration, they they came through the Freedom Center. So David, in many respects, as the general of this movement against this evil, and in terms of his wise mind of how to fight the left as a former leftist, he came from the belly of the beast, so he knew how to fight them. But what a success, because a lot of the good people in the Trump administration came through the Freedom Center, right?
I was just at the Freedom Center's lunch today, where they had Melanie Phillips speak, and just speaking to some of the guests there, so many of them describe how many of the key figures in the conservative movement, like Charlie Kirk, whom they really met for the first time at David Horowitz Freedom Center events, like the Restoration Weekends. And I would see people there who would then later go on to become very, very famous and influential, including people who went into the Trump administration. And that is actually one of the reasons, really the actual reason, that we were targeted by a government investigation for 6 years, because in these Washington Post articles, they would describe the David Horowitz Freedom Center as this brain, this power behind the power behind this whole organization, that David Horowitz was in control of the White House, which is obviously not the case. David Horowitz was not controlling the Trump administration. Rather, he was shaping, guiding, training all of these people into actually being ready, being willing, being able to fight.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I want to discuss a bit, and as you discussed in your article, the things that David taught us, some of his tactics, the things that he understood of how to fight political war. And I don't think there was anybody that understood it better than him. And another issue is how many conservatives shied away from that. That's the tragedy of the conservative movement, because conservatives don't know how to fight. Many conservatives don't know how to fight, and many of them don't want to fight. And that's a problem, but that's for a discussion down the line. But David was a fighter. I want to discuss some of his tactics, but I just want to focus on you just for a little while longer. You are a humble man, but let's just discuss how you've become the CEO now of the Freedom Center. But you have touched on this in your article, and you and I have discussed this, but tell us a little bit of the recent past of your relationship with David. And I know how he really relied on you, because in terms of a lot of his thinking and what we needed covered, you were the one that did it. You were the one that articulated what he needed to be articulated, and you did it the best. And because of that, and for other reasons, he told you that he wanted you to be his intellectual heir. Just speak a little bit about that, and why you are now in the position that you're in?
Well, I think we both got into this kind of activism roughly around the same time. For me, it was definitely September 11th was this trigger mechanism. You mentioned knowing David for about 25 years, so that, tracks around to September 11th, a bit before that. Um, at that point, after September 11th, David became a major voice on campuses, certainly. I'd been following him, but I had not actually had the honor of meeting him or interacting with him. I was reading his work, of course. So my connection with him is a bit briefer than yours was, but it was absolutely transformative. And, you mentioned earlier on how Republicans are very, very reluctant to fight. And when I actually tried to get into conservative journalism, into writing about what was going on, there was this disdain from the establishment because the style was too abrasive, it was too blunt, it was too direct, it was too harsh. And those were all things that were, of course, to be deplored. And, the idea was having these conservative, members of campus conservative groups that were going to be taught to write the Wall Street Journal way and to serve their tenure at various DC institutions, to spend time at the right bars, and then they would become the future of the conservative movement. And that is, of course, not how it ended up, because a whole bunch of these people were sidelined by the ascension of Trump. But even before Trump, David Horowitz was out there. He was out there going to campuses before there really was a strong, vibrant conservative movement on campuses. He was going out there. He was doing the provoking. He was doing the challenging. He was taking on everything from Islamic terrorism to racial slave operations. He was doing this in the most direct way possible, and campuses began trying to find ways to keep him off. There were violent attacks against him. And to me, that was incredibly inspirational, because it showed that you actually could very directly confront this, and you could very directly confront the left. You could very directly confront the jihad, and you could actually provoke them into showing who they really were. And that was one of the things that David understood how to do so very well. He'd come out of the left, which of course grounded him in this ability to fight, but very crucial, this was really a part of who David was. David was a man who was a truth seeker. And there are people who go into the left, and, perhaps that's something you want to talk about also, Jamie, who are searching for the truth. They want the moral position. They want this ideal. And one of David's great revelations was this ideal was not out there, that human beings were flawed, and that is a very religious position. The idea that human beings are indeed flawed, they're not going to create utopia. If they try to gain that kind of power, what they will do is destroy the world with it. And that was really, I think, a big dividing line between the David who had been a leftist and the David who had become a leading figure in the conservative movement. And for me, I know as for you, we're religious people, and we understand that you're not going to create utopia, that the people who want that kind of power start to have delusions of grandeur, delusions of godhood, and they destroy everything around them. But for a lot of leftists, this is a very difficult thing to admit, because it requires looking at themselves honestly and admitting that given enough power, I would do horrible things. And David was able to take a look at that. He was able to take a look at what the left had become so rotten. And that was something that so few leftists of his generation, the liberals, were willing to do. They would look at Altamont. They would look at the ways in which the left had soured, the ways that the whole project had degenerated by the time you were well into the 70s. And they would not be able to draw meaningful conclusions. They would, blame Nixon, blame Reagan, blame some sort of vast right-wing conspiracy for it. But they wouldn't be able to honestly take a look at themselves and say, we are the authors of this. We are responsible for this. And when David was able to take a look at the Black Panthers' murder of Betty Van Patten, he was able to look at that, and he was able to admit that the left is fundamentally rotten because of its ruling ideology, because of its idea that really isn't a God, that we must ourselves dominate. We must ourselves take on these godly powers and create this ideal perfect world. And David's really understanding, he wasn't conventionally religious, but he was able to understand that the limitations of people ensure that you cannot actually create this kind of movement without it degenerating utterly and absolutely. So in many ways, we were on the same wavelength in this regard, in many other regards. David was somebody who was essentially combative when it came to his public persona, but at the same time, for the people who knew him, he was not a abrasive, confrontational person, despite the way that his public persona might appear. He was, like a lot of conservatives, not somebody who really wanted a fight. He was fighting for the right cause. And I think that describes a lot of us as well. People look at Front Page Magazine, they may think that they're seeing this very abrasive, combative site. In reality, it's people who fundamentally believe that this fight needs to be fought, this fight needs to be won. But unlike a lot of people on the left, we're not in this because we really enjoy fighting other people. We believe that we actually have a cause for doing so. And as far as the larger sense goes, David's legacy, it's really important to remember that David influenced the larger conservative movement, and it's vitally important to keep those teachings alive. And the way he did that was, as I meant, we kind of were discussing just now, the importance of actually being able to fight the good fight. Another was the importance of actually finding the truth and bringing it to people at any cost. And while at the same time there is a great conservative populism out there, people who are actually able to take rule one, they're able to be very confrontational. I think part of what makes Front Page Magazine very special is that we actually do dig for the truth. We're not just confrontational for the sake of being confrontational, which is, people mistook David sometimes as being confrontational just for the sake of being confrontational. David believed something very strongly, and that is why he was confrontational. And I like to think that's true of us as well.
Thank you, Daniel. A lot of profound stuff there that we would need to explore for some hours, and I'm grateful to you for everything you just said. Want to touch on something just for a minute, just in terms of those of us who understand the left, and we look beneath the layers, and how you talk about and how David understood and how I've tried to write about that. Very much a spiritual battle, and these are the self-appointed redeemers of humanity, and they get to choose who is saved and who is damned. But they want to be gods, and I often see that, and there's other stuff going on too, like for instance on CNN, Ana Navarro, for instance, when you look at her, the anger. And you can see a couple things there, because it's not really that the political issues are fine, but beneath that, first you can see the hatred of the alpha male and how much they hate Trump. A lot of these leftists, especially the leftist feminists, they hate that strong man of Trump. If it was Romney or, some kind of weak little simp soy boy Republican, they wouldn't be as agitated, but they can't stand that alpha male. And you can see that in Ana Navarro. She just can't stand that there's this powerful male in charge, that she refuses to, and I don't mean submit to, quote unquote, but that she refuses to abide by certain realms of the male-female realms, and how we all have our own lanes. And the leftist feminists, they reject those lanes. They reject how God intended the genders to work with each other and be compatible with one another. And I just wanted to kind of mention that. And then along with that, you can always feel in them, Ana Navarro, you can especially see it in Don Lemon and Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow. When Trump is winning, and when they confront the conservative movement, you can see their rage that they are not gods. They want to be God. And so when the conservative values begin to win, or somebody like Trump gets in power, they're very, very angry, because the ideology and system they want to bring in is where they are gods and there's no creator to submit to. And then they can erase the concept of shame and saying mea culpa. So many of these things are very part of our cause and what we all understood about the left. Do you want to make a comment on that?
Well, I like to say there's how the left sees itself and there's what it really is. When you, in terms of Hollywood figures, if you imagine how the left sees itself, they see themselves as Morgan Freeman. They speak in these soothing voices. They're very wise, and they have all the right answers. And the reality is they're more Rosie O'Donnell or Alec Baldwin. They're very, very angry people. They're filled with rage, and politics serves as a conduit for their rage. But the core of that is ego. The core of that is I want to be all important, And I want to be all important because I am insecure, because I'm broken, because I'm flawed, because I know just what a mess I am inside. And there's their self-image. Their actual image is that they are angry people who are driven by their own brokenness. And again, that is something David understood very, very well.
Yes. Daniel, so let's just touch on some of the things that David understood very well and was teaching us. And you mentioned them in your piece. Look, when I was studying the left, and as David explained as well, and so we see Antonio Gramsci back in the 30s, etc., and is this leftist guy that was, Marxist guy that's teaching how to fight. He was saying, forget politics, grab a hold of the culture, because then when you control the culture, then you control the society and the political realm. And David very well understood that. And it's no surprise that before it was called the Freedom Center, it was the Center for the Study of Popular Culture. Because David understood that it's very important what's happening in the culture. And some of the things that are happening in the culture are the names that we call things, the labels that we call things. So, I just think about even a few of there's been some falling out with some of my friends and acquaintances over the last couple of years, especially over the Trump victory. And I've been even a little bit surprised at how petty some of these people have been. But because of Trump, we have gone our separate ways in turn. Not that I was ever great friends with leftists, but there was still a cordial kind of friendship. But they can't even do that anymore. Why I'm saying that is racist, sexist, classist, homophobe, and they are very afraid of being called a racist. And then they are even afraid that they might even be friends with me on social media. Somebody might see that they're friends with a racist and fascist. And these people are not just brainwashed in terms of what they're thinking about politics, but how terrified they are of being called a name. And the left has been very successful in calling names. And David was always teaching us, you got to call things by the right names. Stop calling them liberals. Call them this. Stop calling this that. You've got to say this. And he taught us that, didn't he, Daniel? And when he was working with you on your pieces, he was always stressing to you how we've got to call things by the right names, right?
You forgot Islamophobe. That's a big one. But
Yeah.
yes. Though really cancel culture largely takes its toll on the left, and the left understands the power of language, the transformative ability to shape how people communicate. It's something George Orwell wrote quite a bit about as well in 1984, for example. Yes, but David really his focus was bluntness, directness, to not just, for the sake of shocking people, but the sake of getting the truth out. And that's something that used to be the guiding, part of the masthead at the front page magazine. It's still very much, the guiding message. I have all these messages on my voicemail from David, and a lot of it be great article, but here, just call it in a more direct way, be more blunt. Call it exactly what it is. These people are traitors. These people are enemies. Be as strong about it as you possibly can. And that's still a voice I hear when I'm writing articles now. Go for the throat. And David understood that very well because, again, he had come out of the left. Sometimes for me, I have to recalibrate a little bit because I did not actually come out of the left. I was never a liberal. Maybe it would have been a useful transformative experience also, but I'm afraid I never actually went that road. But yes, it was something that David was very, very passionate about. And it's a passion that he brought to me, he brought to you, he brought to the entire conservative movement.
Absolutely, Daniel. So interesting how the Marxist enemy, our enemy, and the enemy of humanity and the enemy of our Creator, they need to change the language to how they want the language to work for them in their war, but they very much manipulate language. So, in terms of what they call Trump and he's a fascist, he's a racist, and all this stuff. And so David was teaching us call them neo-Nazis because that's what they really are. Call them, we got to call them this. And so he was very, very strong on that and guided us in that way. And not to, as you mentioned in your piece, not to be afraid of telling the truth about America's enemies, to confront our enemies. And that's what a lot of conservatives shied from and shy from, and they kind of didn't want to take part in that political battle. But speaking of our enemies, where David was very powerful in this, and in Radical Son, he talks about how him and Peter Collier began to understand while they were involved in their transition from the left. They began to see that there was a malice in the leftist movement, that there was a lust and yearning for destruction. And this is one of my main interests and part of my battle. I cannot stand, Daniel, this thing about how, the left, they also love America and they're just well-intentioned people. It just, some of the ideas are flawed. And, this also comes from, socialism, Marxism. It's a good idea. It just kind of doesn't work. Like, if it doesn't work, how can it be a good idea? So also, if it doesn't work, then maybe people didn't come up with the idea for good, genuine, loving reasons. Now, I just want to mention this a bit. Bill O'Reilly, and I got a problem with that guy over the years, and I think he did a lot of damage with just this particular realm. Yeah, he was professional. He did this well. He did this well. He was a great, good on many levels. But you probably noticed this as well, Daniel. He did this all the time. I think Obama loves the country. I think he means well. I don't understand why he's doing this. Why is Obama doing this? I think he means well. He was always playing that fair and balanced thing, but he was always attributing this kind of well intent to Obama and to the left. This is so destructive because when you say that they're well intentioned, you're really masking over and clouding over what the left really is and the malice and the lust for destruction that's in its heart. These are not people that mean well. And when you pretend that they do or imagine that they do, you are actually disarming us from preparing ourselves. You can even use the analogy of let us even say the Oslo Syndrome Jews that were trying to convince the Jewish people that Oslo will be okay and you have to be more optimistic and positive. You're actually not helping the Jewish people and the Israeli people to defend themselves. And so we have to be very honest about what the enemy is, what it wants, so we can actually prepare to defend ourselves. Let me give this to you.
So in normative politics, what you do is you find common ground, even with people you disagree with. But that's when the case where there is actually common ground. And that's really the great fallacy with the left, is that there actually is no common ground. That's something people struggled to understand, 30, 40 years ago. Now it's very obvious because we don't agree on anything with the left. No, we can't even agree on the definition of a woman. We can't agree on the the basis for common ground, which is what does it mean to be a good person? We absolutely disagree on that. We really don't disagree with anything at this point. The left will argue that math is just the invention of old, dead white slave owners, and feminists can bring a whole new understanding to whether 2 + 2 really equals 4, something else entirely. So when you have absolutely nothing in common with people, and we really have nothing in common with the left at this point, intellectually, morally, socially, culturally, you can't actually find common ground. When you try to find common ground with people who are fundamentally alien and hostile to you, what you're doing is committing suicide, whether it's Israel or whether it's the United States. When you're trying to find common ground, you're just deluding yourself, and you're deluding other people into thinking that there is common ground to be found with people who only find common ground in order to stab you in the back or when they get enough power at the front, as it may be. And this has been the great mistake, the great tragedy of so many Republicans, some of whom were corrupt, some of whom really did not believe in anything at all, and others of whom were, useful idiots. They thought that there was some sort of common ground to be found with people, and there is no common ground. And that's an important insight that David brought to the table. And he had credibility in bringing that to the table because he had come out of the left himself, and he could honestly and believably speak about it.
Yeah. This is a very important issue to me. I hate that in conservatives when they start lecturing to me, oh, don't be a Debbie Downer. You got to be more positive. You got to have more faith. Everything's going to be okay, and they mean well. And we just no, 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 no. Like, I'm actually not being a Debbie Downer. I'm actually just making a threat assessment. And I also do have faith. I just see, I have the headlights on and see what's coming. But I see in these people, in terms of these deluded people, and what I said that O'Reilly was always doing, there's a part of the story is an emotional incapacity. They actually can't make it through the day if they accept the reality of really what is. And in terms of, just I'll get back to O'Reilly again when he was always saying, why is Obama doing this? Why is Obama doing this? Well, I don't know. Like, why don't you just invite David Horowitz and Daniel Greenfield on the show, and then they'll explain it to you. But if that actually happened, then you couldn't actually say, why is he doing this anymore? And you wouldn't be able to say that you think he has good intentions. And then you would have to change your image, and you don't want to do that. So you really like to be that guy that really is fair and thinks that, that Obama has good intentions. And so this kind of narcissistic desire to have an image and have a certain way of looking at things and not being the Debbie Downers out there, that's actually doing a lot of destruction. And let's get back to our focus here in terms of pursuing David's legacy. And we can't do any of this on the Glazov Gang if it wasn't for our sponsors. We're going to take a quick sponsor break.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
And that's right. Make sure to go to mypillow.com or mystore.com and use promo code GG21. You can get a discount of up to 60% off on all the amazing products. You're going to be helping out the Glazov Gang, but perhaps more importantly, you're going to be helping out the great Mike Lindell. And if you like one-of-a-kind handmade art, make sure to go to lutfstudio.com and purchase resin art pieces made by the one and only, the wonderful and amazing Annie Cyrus. That's the producer of this show. Use promo code Glazov to get special discounts. You're going to be helping out the Glazov Gang as well as Annie Cyrus. Ladies and gentlemen, very importantly, do you want even more content from Front Page Magazine? Right now, if you haven't already, sign up for Front Page Plus to unlock exclusive blockbuster series and articles you're not going to find anywhere else. You're going to find virtual town halls with our top rank authors, people like Daniel Greenfield and Robert Spencer and Mark Tapson and so many of our superstars. Bruce Bauer, Bruce Thornton. You're not going to get this anywhere else. Go to Front Page Plus, and you can do that for $3.99 a month. That's $3.99 a month. Go to frontpagemag.com and click on the section that you will see labeled FP Plus, and you're going to have an amazing experience there and learn a lot. Daniel, tell our audience a little bit about FP Plus.
FPM Plus is awesome, and I don't just say that because I'm published there. Okay, I'm saying that because I'm published there, and I'm contractually obligated to say it, but it is actually really great because, it enables some of our best writers, not including me, to actually showcase deeper, more powerful, more compelling work that dig into things that we don't even have the resources to get into, and Front Page Magazine. Front Page Magazine is absolutely great, of course, but with added support, what we can do is deliver more and better and deeper stories, and that's what we're trying to do with FPM Plus.
Absolutely. And thank you once again, Daniel, for making FP Plus and Front Page just the fascinating educational and blockbuster place that it is. Now, speaking of...
Well, first of all, I have to say that you're the one who actually makes the place what it is, and it's absolutely fantastic, and due to your unflagging labor as editor.
You know, these are the parts of the conversation that are my favorite. So Daniel, I appreciate your kind words. So let's just talk about that for a minute. And I don't mean about myself, but where the Freedom Center stands right now, and it's a sad moment. We've lost our general, but he guided us well. He educated us well. And for a lot of the viewers that I hope are supporters of the Freedom Center and will continue to support the Freedom Center, let's just talk a little bit about that. You mentioned it in your article. So look, you are now the CEO, and so in many respects, that is the replacement of David Horowitz, if I'm not mistaken. You are now the general. We have the great Michael Finch, and a lot of love goes out to him. Quarter of a century now, if not more, of being the president and other roles and at the Freedom Center. But he was very much, I mean, he wasn't completely behind the scenes, but on many levels he was. I mean, he's also a great poet, a great writer, but he made everything work also behind the scenes of raising funds for the center and organizing all of the events, a lot of his ideas also. So we owe a lot of credit to Mike, and so he remains the president at the moment, and I hope for a very long time. We've got the amazing Todd Snyder, who perhaps has the title marketing director, but he's a million other things. This guy is really a renaissance figure, and a lot of credit goes to him for making the Freedom Center work so well, and it's skyrocketing on some levels, thank God, because of his brilliance. We've got the great Mark Tapson, who's a Shulman Fellow. Many of his writings. He's also got his podcasts. And we've got the great Lonnie Leitner, whose Go for the Heart training has changed so many things for the better. Bruce Thornton, Bruce Bauer, Jason Hill. These are our Shulman Fellows, great writers. Robert Spencer, another Shulman Fellow. His incredible work at Jihad Watch, telling the truth about Islam, just central figure at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. John Perazzo over at Discover the Networks. And David, I mean, what he created there's that whole site there really reveals the unholy alliance and gives all of the profiles. Sarah Dogan has done tremendous work on the campuses. Can you just speak a little bit about the individuals I've raised? And so this is our future. These are the superstars at the center. So in no way should people think that absolutely David passing is very tragic and sad for us, but we also ourselves don't want to despair. We don't want our supporters to despair, because we've got a lot of soldiers that are very talented and very strong and still ready to continue the battle. Right, Daniel?
Part of what's been going on, beyond David. We lost Peter Collier some years back. I just wrote an obituary for Michael Adine. So many people of a particular generation are now disappearing. And there's a tendency in some parts to say, well, it's over now. We've lost these giants. But especially David was very determined to actually have the work continue, to bring in people who actually could continue that work. So, we are both examples of that. We have a great team. Michael absolutely keeps the Freedom Center running. The very fact that there is a Freedom Center is very much a testimony to Michael, who did all the organizational stuff behind the scenes. And yes, we hope he's going to be around with us for a long time. We've got Mark, who's really bringing a lot of energy to this. And we've got Todd. You may never have met Todd. The people watching this probably never met Todd, but he's a wunderkind who's really bringing the Freedom Center into the future. We have really some incredible talent as far as the Showman Fellows go, and thank you to Dr. Bob for actually giving us Showman Fellows. Dr. Bob Showman is responsible for that, but yes, Bruce Thornton, Jason Hill, Bruce Bauer, their writing is incredible, and by Robert Spencer, how can you even sum up Robert Spencer? Robert Spencer is a giant. Robert Spencer single-handedly helped put the war against the jihad on the map, and he's still keeping it there. So we are very privileged. We are very blessed to be able to work as part of a team with these people. And that's why, yes, it is important to remember that we've lost David. It is a very deeply tragic loss. But David had been preparing for this for a very long time. He wrote his first book about mortality not that long after you knew him when he was first diagnosed. And he survived that. He wrote another book about mortality in 2015. He has been preparing for this perhaps longer than any other human being on Earth. Yeah, he knew what was coming. He wrote extensively about mortality, his mortality, the fragility of human beings, and he understood that to actually keep your legacy alive, you have to pass it along. That's something that also I would like the Freedom Center to be doing going forward. No, we need to be working with the next generation to convey David's ideas, his tactics, and also his training. And I think that's a very, very key part of our work going forward.
Well, Daniel, our work, what you and I have dedicated our life to, is right before our eyes. So we got this leftist that shoots 2 Israeli diplomats because he thinks they're Jewish or they're connected to the Jewish cause. But we've got the leftist carrying out a jihadist mission. This is the unholy alliance that David wrote about. This is my book, United in Hate, where I was explaining the left's romance with our enemies, with communists, with jihadists. So it's right before our eyes right now. So what we are doing, what we are dedicated to, is more relevant and urgent than ever, right?
Absolutely. And people wonder, why are these leftists siding with jihadists? Aren't they aware that they're going to finish them off? Whether they're aware or not, what's really important is they want a cause, they want a reason to be outraged, to mobilize, to radicalize, and to actually then engage in violence. And violence is not just some unintended spin-off. It's not a bug, it's the feature. The left wants to radicalize, to build an army in order to take over America. That's always been their goal. The causes individually are absolutely interchangeable. They don't care about any of those causes. You examine it closely and you find the left does not believe in any of the things it claims to care about. In fact, you look at the Soviet Union, it tossed out all the things that the left believed in, including everything from environmentalism to feminism. So what the left is really about is fighting a war. And we are now actually seeing the first communist terrorist attack in quite a while, certainly first one targeting Jewish people. We've had a lot of violence from BLM violence in 2020, but this is really the first more kind of directly specific attack rather than mob violence. This guy who was a communist, he was associated with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is a communist party. It's a Marxist-Leninist party. People throw out in the word communism, in this case, literally communist party. One that actually celebrated October 7th. Day after October 7th, they have a big rally all out for Palestine, and they're cheering the 700, which they think is the number of Israeli dead at that point. It's going to be climbing after that, of course. And they're boasting that the resistance is doing this. The resistance is liberating areas. And by resistance, they mean Hamas. So we are talking about terrorist organizations, ones that are hostile to the United States. They opportunistically side with Islam. And, David has written extensively about the common causes there, but their ultimate goal is the overthrow and the destruction of the United States of America. And right now they see Gaza, they see supporting Hamas as a vehicle for doing that. They're going to jump from one to the other. Back in New York City, when I would actually document some of these demonstrations, I would see the same people. One day they're protesting over the environment, the next day they're protesting over illegal aliens. But it's the same people. The third day it's over Israel. Fourth day it's something else. But it's really the same cast of the same people coming out and making it seem like they have a much bigger movement than they actually do. And the Trump administration has been fantastic in cutting some of that down, cutting away some of the financial resources behind this movement. It's one of the projects we were actually working on. It was David's brainchild at the Freedom Center through Freedom Center Investigates. And we were taking on a lot of these leftist nonprofit groups that pretended to be community groups that actually got themselves nonprofit status and use that nonprofit status to promote the worst kinds of things in the world, from terrorism to pedophilia. So this is a cause that we're still fighting against. And what happened there, by the way, I should mention another fun thing about the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It's heavily intertwined with an organization known as the People's Forum. The People's Forum is actually funded and controlled out of Communist China. So we literally have domestic terrorist groups that are funded and untrained and promoted by the enemies, the foreign enemies of this country, not just in the Middle East, not just in the Muslim world, but also in Communist China. So you've got a communist terrorist associated with a group that is actually funded by Communist China.
Well, Daniel, look, the IRS under Biden also tried to take us down, and how it persecuted the Freedom Center. That witch hunt is over, thank God. And I think we are also a bit relieved that Trump is in power now. But we survived that witch hunt, and it hurt us, but we're still here and we're fighting. So let's just end on this. Then you are the general now. We're looking ahead. We're regrouping after that witch hunt. We've got our FP Plus series. We've got your investigations at Front Page Magazine and other people's investigations. We've got podcast episodes, including with the great Mark Tapson. We've got pamphlets coming out, books coming out. So let's just finish on that in terms of all of our projects and the battle that we're going to keep fighting against the left and against the totalitarian forces that want to take us down.
No, not every organization would have survived a 6-year or even a 2-year extensive government investigation. It says something about us, about the Freedom Center, about the spirit of David, and the spirit he instilled in us that we are still here after that. We've been battered, we've been bruised. We're absolutely managing a turnaround nonetheless. And, we are following those principles. One of those is telling the truth. So we are doing investigative journalism. We are digging up. We are confronting the left in every possible way. And we're finding the most strategic ways of doing that. Obviously, we want to keep David's memory alive, as I've discussed. We want to keep his writings out there, but we also want to confront every single challenge that we are dealing with, whether it's the jihad, whether it's China, whether it's the left. We're fighting them on all fronts, and we're a small organization. We all know, those of us who work there, just how small this organization is. The fact that we are still here with this very small organization really shows what an incredible team that we have, and how we are actually going to take them on is by taking those same skills. We've discussed some of the incredible skills of our team. We're going to take some of those same skills, and we're going to apply them to every single leftist problem, because the left is a problem. We're going to apply them to how the left gets funding. We're going to apply them to how the left controls every part of government. We're going to apply them to leftist corruption. One of our upcoming projects actually is collecting some of our articles, our investigative journalism on corruption in California, because, California is a major epicenter of leftist power in the United States. We're going after them on every possible front that we can. We're digging for the truth, and we're going to look for ways to creatively and interestingly bring it up, because that was one of the things that David was very good at. He was good at actually getting attention, and it's gotten a lot harder than when he used to, for two reasons. One of which is that the social media has taken over to such a degree, and it's also very tightly controlled and manipulated, that it's not as easy to gain a foothold. And the second, of course, is that in the past, when David first got started, there would be some possibility of dialogue with the left, of interaction with the media, and now there no longer is.
Yes.
But that just means we have to get more aggressive, more creative in digging for the truth and bringing it out there and confronting.
Amen. Thank you, Daniel. Well, you perceive very clearly the enemy we face, the job we have to do, and you are equipping yourself nobly and bravely to face it and to fight it. And it's going to be an honor being at your side, fighting these evil forces for the cause of truth and freedom. Thank you, Daniel, so much for joining the Glazov gang this evening.
Thank you for being part of an incredible team that David put together and led, and one that we're going to continue using to fight his war.
Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. Everybody, one of the things you can do is go to X, Twitter. If you haven't already, follow Daniel Greenfield on there. Go to frontpagemag.com. Read us regularly and support us there. When you go to frontpagemag.com, go to the top right-hand corner. You're going to see a box remembering David Horowitz. Click on it, read all about David, and support him and his legacy. And also, while you're on frontpagemag.com, click on Front Page Plus and subscribe. We'll see you soon. Good night.